Ohio has more people in it today than it did 50 years ago. So why does it have entire cities where 2/3 of the population just vanished? And nobody really talks about it. That's not a recession. That's not bad luck. That's something else entirely. And by the time we get to City 7, I think you're going to see exactly what I mean. City 1, Youngstown. In 1950, Youngstown had about 167,000 people. Today, it has fewer than 60,000. Economists John Russo and Sherry Lee Lincoln, in their widely cited research on deindustrialization, literally called it the poster child. That's not a city that shrank. That's 2/3 of a city gone. At its peak, the Mahoning Valley was producing so much steel, it was called Steel Valley, a nickname you only earn when you're not exaggerating. Good union wages, high home ownership, and neighborhoods with their own restaurants and social clubs. If you grew up here in 1965, would you have believed, even for a second, that it could just stop? Then came September 19th, 1977. Locals call it Black Monday. Youngstown Sheet and Tube shut down its Campbell Works plant. 5,000 workers. No advance notice, one morning. Within 5 years, according to research in the American Prospect, more than 40,000 area workers in steel and related industries had lost their jobs. The tax base collapsed. The population walked. And by the 2000s, researchers documented around 20,000 abandoned properties. So many that the city formally adopted a shrinking cities policy, officially planning around the absence rather than pretending anyone was coming back. A city built entirely on growth had to accept it would keep getting smaller. Who decided to pull out? And did anyone ask the people left behind? City 2, East Liverpool. East Liverpool used to be the pottery capital of the world. Not Ohio, not America, but the world. Between 1880 and 1950, according to Museum of Ceramics records and peer-reviewed archaeological research, its potteries produce roughly 2/3 of all ceramic dinnerware made in the United States. By 1923, the city had 17 firms, 270 kilns, and 7,000 workers. Skilled potters emigrated specifically from Staffordshire, England, to be here. Streets were named Dresden Avenue, Etruria Street, and Wedgwood Street. The industry didn't just employ the city, it was the city. So what happens when the thing that a place fundamentally is just disappears? Cheaper imports in the 1950s, automation in the 60s, global competition through the 70s and 80s? The potteries didn't close all at once. They died slowly, which in some ways was worse. The population peaked at over 26,000 in 1970 and has fallen to under 10,000 today. But it wasn't just the jobs that left. The knowledge left too. Generational expertise in the kilns that can't be recovered once it walks out the door. East Liverpool still has its Museum of Ceramics, still runs pottery classes. School mascot is literally a kiln with a face. The city is holding on to something. You can just feel how far away that something is. At what point does preserving a city's identity become a way of avoiding its future? City 3, Ironton. Ironton sits at the very southern tip of Ohio, on the river, right at the Kentucky and West Virginia border, a part of the state most Ohioans forget exists. And that forgetting is part of the story. Before Pittsburgh, Lawrence County was one of the most productive iron-producing regions in America. The ore was local, the timber was local, and the river made everything movable. The city literally got its name because iron was why it existed. Then, Pittsburgh got more efficient, the ore played out, and the furnaces went cold. But here's what makes Ironton different from Youngstown. Youngstown had Black Monday, a date, a headline, a moment. Ironton had nothing like that. No dramatic closure, no news cycle, just a slow, multi-generational withdrawal of opportunity that happened too gradually to become a story anywhere. And social scientists studying regional decline have documented this repeatedly. A slow decline can actually be harder to respond to than a sudden one because there's no moment of collective shock, no political pressure to act, just a quiet tightening of options until the people who could leave already have. By the time researchers started documenting the opioid crisis and multi-generational poverty in Lawrence County, the decline had been going on for decades. The data was always there. Who was supposed to be reading it? City 4, Steubenville. Steubenville calls itself the City of Murals. Drive through and you'll see them. Big painted walls celebrating history, heritage, Dean Martin, who was born here. Beautiful, genuinely. But a city trading on its murals is really holding on to a past it can no longer access, which is worth naming. The numbers. Population peaked at 37,651 in 1940 and sits around 18,000 today. From 1980 to 2000, the Steubenville metro lost population faster than any other urban area in the United States. Not one of the fastest, but the fastest. Steel drove everything here, and when Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel finally closed its Steubenville mill in 2005, after decades of decline, Jefferson County had already lost roughly 3/4 of its manufacturing jobs, according to the Century Foundation. A quarter of residents today live below the poverty line. Median household income sits around $47,000, against a national median of $74,000. When the middle class left or slid down, the tax base shrank, the schools lost funding, the businesses closed, and people left because things were declining, which made things decline further. It's a loop, and once it starts, what exactly breaks it?
City 5. Mansfield. Mansfield is different in one important way.
It's not where you'd expect. Not on the river, not in the forgotten southeastern corner. It's in north-central Ohio, right off I-71, halfway between Columbus and Cleveland. The kind of location that should have insulated it. So why didn't it? At its peak, Westinghouse alone employed around 8,000 workers here, roughly a quarter of the entire city's population. Tappan, which invented the insulated oven and built the first consumer microwave, was based here too. Multiple industries, multiple employers. The diversified base planners always recommend. The problem is that protection only works if the sectors collapse separately. They didn't. Mansfield Tire and Rubber closed in 1978, Westinghouse in 1990, Tappan in 1992, and GM in 2010. Richland County lost 10,000 jobs across those closures, according to the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. No single Black Monday, so no symbol, no coverage, no attention, just quiet, steady loss. And then there's the Richland Mall, opened in 1969, expanded in 1997, and sold in 2024 for $4 million after its owners accumulated $37 million in debt. A mall that represented a community's confidence in its own future was sold for $4 million. That's not just a retail story. That's what happened to the economy underneath it.
City 6. Warren. By now, the pattern is visible.
Steel, manufacturing, deindustrialization, population loss. Warren is another chapter, but it has one layer that changes how you read everything. Warren's population peaked at 63,494 in 1970 per U.S. Census data, and sits around 39,000 today, nearly 40% gone. At its peak, the concentration of industrial wages here was among the highest in Ohio. Workers weren't just surviving, they were building middle-class wealth, houses, savings, and college funds. A class structure built deliberately through union contracts over decades. When the mills closed, the class structure went with the jobs. What remained was a polarized city trying to maintain infrastructure built for 63,000 people on revenue from 39,000. Urban planners call this legacy cost. The infrastructure outlives the economy that paid for it. The pipes, the roads, and the fire stations don't get smaller because the population did, and the gap gets covered by the people who stayed, who are usually the ones least able to afford it. Warren isn't uniquely mismanaged. These cities are all responding rationally to the same structural forces, the same investment decisions, the same logic of capital moving to wherever it costs less. That's not a coincidence. That's a system working as designed.
City 7. Wellston.
Most cities on this list made national news when they collapsed. Youngstown had Black Monday. Steubenville had researchers and documentary crews. They became symbols because they were big enough to be symbols. Wellston never got that. Nobody came to document it. No think tanks wrote papers about it. It just quietly lost 40% of its population over 50 years, while the rest of Ohio looked the other way. And that, more than anything else on this list, might be the most honest version of how this actually works. Population today? Around 5,000, down from over 8,000 in 1950. Jackson County's poverty rate sits roughly double the national average. You can walk Wellston's Main Street in 20 minutes and count the empty storefronts yourself. No statistic needed to explain what you're looking at. The people who stayed aren't the ones who failed. A lot of them had roots here, family here, 3 generations of belonging that can't be easily relocated. The economy that was supposed to support that choice was dismantled, and nothing was built to replace it. That's not a natural disaster. It's a series of decisions about which communities get investment and which ones get quietly managed in decline. Wellston didn't end up this way because of some unavoidable historical arc. It ended up this way because it was small enough not to matter to the people making those decisions. And whether right now, somewhere, someone is running that same calculation about a different city, maybe one you've heard of, maybe one you live in, that's the question this whole list is really asking. Cities don't empty overnight. They lose a factory, then a grocery store, then a school, then a generation. And somewhere in that sequence, the people who stayed stop asking when things will come back and start asking why they were ever promised they would. If this can happen in the heart of the Midwest, in cities that once made the steel, the pottery, the iron that literally built America, it can happen anywhere. I'll keep finding the world's hidden corners. You just have to click subscribe to come along.